Hey everybody, Pat Rigsby here with another episode of the Fitness Business School. And today I am with Garrett Salpeter, and Garrett owns NewFit, which I'm going to let him kind of unpack everything about it. But I know they've got a really popular device, NEWBIE, that has a whole lot of utility in the rehab, fitness, performance world. And I just thought, man, this would be a really, really interesting option for us to talk about things that I think are potentially a really powerful tool, whether you're in the rehab world or you want to kind of skate to where the puck's headed in the performance or fitness world. So welcome, Garrett.
Thank you, Pat. It's an honor to be here. As I mentioned before we started recording, I read one of your books many, many years ago, and you were influential in my journey learning more about the fitness business too. So thank you.
Well, my pleasure. And I know, strangely enough, I mean, we've connected through a couple different mutual friends for different reasons. So it was good fortune that we got to connect on this. I know a little bit of the backstory of NewFit and NewBie, but I'm sure you can tell the story a little bit better than I can. So let's talk about really what this is and how it came to exist.
The name NewFit is spelled NEU, like neurological, and then fit for fitness. So the reason for that is that I'm attempting to put our philosophy front and center, which is if we work on the fitness, the vitality, the health of the nervous system, that is going to take us a long way, whether we're talking about rehabilitation from injury or surgery, attempting to reverse chronic pain, or we're talking about general fitness or fine tuning athletic performance. The common thread throughout all of those endeavors is the nervous system. And part of the inspiration of this for me is I grew up as an athlete. I love hearing you talk about that quote of skating to where the puck is going to be, because I grew up playing ice hockey and ended up playing in college. And I had several injuries along the way where I was just so frustrated with the traditional physical therapy, traditional orthopedic medicine. And then at the end of my time in college, I had this experience that was just such a strong contrast that was so different that it changed the whole course of my life and career. And that experience involved having some torn ligaments, being told I would likely have to get surgery. And then I met a guy who was a chiropractor doing functional neurology. And he was the first person to introduce me to the true importance of the nervous system and how the neurological response to injury does or does not support the healing process. And he also introduced me to direct current as opposed to alternating current, this type of current where the electric field can actually also influence the underlying healing processes inside of the body, as opposed to the TENS units or the Russian stim or most of what people are familiar with out there. So I had this experience where, long story short, I ended up recovering without surgery, getting back on the ice, and I was so happy and relieved as a hockey player and as someone who was a physics major, was already set to go to graduate school in engineering, to find something that actually made sense scientifically from first principles. That's the part that really got me excited. And so that is where I say it changed the course of my life, because I ended up using older versions of direct current technology and working. I was down in Austin, Texas, where at the University of Texas, ended up working inside of the private practice of the guy who was the chiropractor for the UT Longhorn football team. I rented a 120 square foot room in his office, started treating people underneath him using older versions of electrical stimulation, and kept seeing over that 8 or 9 years. I kind of put in my 10,000 hours, kept seeing ways to improve the technology and methodology, and did additional graduate school in neuroscience throughout those years. And then eventually came to realize that the only real path forward for me was to create a device. And so that device, of course, became the NEWBIE, and that's sort of the genesis of NewFit. So NEWBIE is neurobioelectric. As I mentioned, it is this direct current, this specialized type of current. And there's all these different applications across rehabilitation and performance. What we're probably best known for is this mapping process. So if you have a physical therapy clinic or you have a gym and you're assessing athletes, you can actually take our device and you can scan around on an athlete's body. If you're just listening, you don't see, but if you're watching, you see I'm actually taking an electrode and scanning around on my own upper body here. You actually scan around and we can find where the nervous system, because of a response to injury or because of bad habits developed over time, we can find where the nervous system is guarding and creating excess tension, or bracing, or inhibiting and shutting down muscles, or there's hypersensitivity that can lead to chronic pain even after an injury is healed. You can find exactly where, neurologically speaking, those patterns are being imposed on the body. And then because of the unique properties of direct current, in addition to finding them, we can also accelerate the process of neuromuscular reeducation, where you can help that athlete or that client or that patient work through those patterns and restore more normal, more optimal and efficient function very quickly. So when I say we're best known for the mapping process, it's likely because of all the excitement that people have when they have experiences sort of like I had back with my wrist. But we have people who come in with a grade 2 separated shoulder. So there's actually some damage in the AC ligament, for example, and they can only lift their arm, call it 45 degrees to the side. And in one session, they're getting their arms up overhead. We see stuff like this happen on a regular basis every day in the clinic. And those are so interesting because in 10 actual minutes of treatment, no one's ligaments healed, right? It's not like you're sewing anything back together. What's changing is the neurological function. And so that gives us insight into how much of the issue is hardware damage, is actual tissue damage that we do need to allow time for it to heal. Yes, it can be accelerated, but there's still going to be some time to heal, versus it allows us to tell how much of it is actually the neurological response to injury that's holding back, delaying the recovery process, keeping someone locked in that cycle of dysfunction and limitation. And I think that's, at least in the realm of sports injuries and athletic performance, that's the big breakthrough here, is by prioritizing that neurological response and those neurological and protective and compensatory patterns, we can often change function very quickly. And as Gray Cook says, you want to reset first, and then you can reinforce through exercises to maintain that, to, like he talks about, hitting save on the document. And that is an opportunity to really reset. And then you can use it for more precise teaching muscles later on in the progression, teaching muscles to contract versus relax. If you want to get better motor control of your shoulder in external rotation, if you're talking about pitching, or if you want to work on hip extension, you can contract the glute while you lengthen out the anterior hip musculature, for example. So there's all these different ways that you can apply it, including also the master reset for recovery, which is our version of a vagus nerve stimulation protocol, which can help recovery after exercise or during the stress of a long season, whatever it might be.
Man, I mean, pretty exciting from a lot of different angles, and I love the backstories of where the motivation or the impetus comes from. Hey, I had this problem. I became curious about this, or became inspired to solve a problem because I had it. It wasn't just, hey, I'm chasing opportunity or something like that, but it's like, hey, I had this experience and I want to find a better solution. And I think when I've been able to connect with people who've done that, it's just the passion for the impact they're having is much higher. So I will say that there's probably a pretty good chance that a lot of the listeners or viewers aren't that familiar with the NEWBIE, but I know that when we had connected to do this podcast, I started kind of picking around the site, and I'm like, man, there's like one a mile from me. And it's a big organization or network of physical therapy practices here in the greater Louisville area. They're diehards, and it seems like they're big advocates for what you do. And I think what I quickly found and was impressed with is, I mean, you've got a pretty big footprint. You've got a lot of different locations using this, a lot of reach into the professional sports landscape as well. So talk about how you've kind of grown this and gotten the word out.
I love what you said on the front end of that comment there about the passion for the work and wanting to solve a problem that I myself had, which many entrepreneurs and many people listening to this will experience. I think a lot of your listeners probably relate to the scenario of being interested in the material, in the content, and then having to learn business along the way, which is where you and your education comes in, as opposed to, as you said, being a business person just looking for an opportunity in sports or in fitness. And so I I like the way you said that, and that certainly resonates with me, as I'm sure it does you listening to this. So, in terms of the scope of NewFit in the last 8 years, it's been so exciting and humbling and energizing, just amazing to see the growth from what started in just our four walls here to see now 400 or 500 clinics around the United States, and then we have distributors in other countries. So there's clinics in Canada, UK, Australia. Should be this year getting out of the English speaking world into some other countries as well. And it's been really wonderful. And yet at the same time, many people listening to this may not have heard of NewFit yet. And in part, that's our job to do a better job marketing, of course. And also, a lot of our marketing is more to professionals, especially physical therapists, then some chiropractors, athletic trainers, strength coaches, people doing that. So we're not marketing as much to the general public because more of that is being done locally by the facilities like the ones around you, Pat, that have the device. So there's at the same time there's some really amazing stories. Like we have videos of Saquon Barkley talking about his experience using the NEWBIE when he was recovering from his ACL surgery several seasons ago. There's several great clips of Joe Rogan talking about using NewFit on his podcast. He talked a couple of times. He talked for 5 to 10 minutes about his experience where he had this really difficult back pain, sciatic pain, and he tried everything over several months and it wasn't going away. A couple of weeks doing NewFit, it was feeling better. He's here. Our home office is in Austin. He lives here, so he actually was coming in and working with us. And there's these different channels that are more mainstream, general population audience, but a lot of what we do is go to physical therapy industry shows or strength and conditioning, more clinical, typically types of conferences. So that, a little bit on the marketing. It is so awesome to see though the types of facilities and clinics that have this, because they're working with such a breadth. There's some that specialize in working with elderly, some that specialize in youth athletes, a lot that do general population, then a lot that do neurological. And in the world of rehabilitation, there's kind of orthopedic and then neuro. So neuro would be like stroke, spinal cord injury, MS, neuropathy, various neurodegenerative conditions like that. And we've seen some amazing results there. We actually, if I may, we have several published studies. One that I think really stands out in that category in the last year was our most ambitious, where we had 150 patients and split into two groups, 75 each. They all had diabetic peripheral neuropathy, and they were in their 70s when it's been written off that they can never heal in any meaningful way. And so half the group got traditional alternating current TENS unit, and then half got the direct current of the NEWBIE. The half that got the TENS unit got some temporary relief in pain, which is what people expect. That's sort of the standard of care, and that was it. With the direct current of the NEWBIE, they saw not only as much or more improvements in pain, also increased sensation, better ability to perform activities of daily living, and we actually measured the electrical activity in the nerves, EMG amplitude and nerve conduction velocity. And with the alternating current of the TENS unit, little to no change, but we actually saw statistically significant improvements. So there's regenerative changes happening in the nerves, even in just 6 weeks of twice a week experiencing this direct current. So there's some really cool applications there in that neurological realm. And that part of why that was so cool, I think, is that it was the first study comparing in humans head to head alternating current versus direct current. So you see if you're listening, you can't see, but if you're watching, you see my shirt is NewFit, but it's in the font of AC/DC, the greatest rock band of all, or at least one of them, greatest rock bands of all time, in my opinion. And so we kind of work in that AC/DC theme into some of our branding and marketing.
I like it. I like it a lot there. So I know when we talked offline, certainly, yes, very much more prevalent in the practitioner world, the physical therapy world. Talk a little bit about the implications for the training gym owner, because I'll tell you what we have seen over the last couple of years is really a massive uptick in training gyms that place an emphasis on serving the 50 and older, 55 and older population that maybe 15 years ago was a little more of an afterthought. Everybody went after the younger, kind of aesthetically driven population, but now it's people want to live better, they want to stay active, they want to enjoy better quality life, and we've seen a real significant kind of growth in that area. What kind of implications might this have for them?
There are several, and there's a lot of examples where it's been successful in that fitness world. The one caveat that I'll give is that at least with our current flagship product, the NEWBIE, it is classified as a medical device, and so the facility would have to have someone who's at least in a medical director or a medical supervisor capacity in order to use it. So I just want to caveat everything by saying that legal compliance note. Your results are not guaranteed. You might never. So the application here, it actually started, as you said, Pat, there was a lot more aesthetics emphasis at different times. So that's actually a lot of where we started, because there's at least 3, if not more, Mr. Olympia champions. And then if you look at other divisions, there's a dozen or more champions among physique and bodybuilding and bikini and all these different of champions who have used it. And we've heard a few different versions of the story as to why they like it. And I start there because if it can help someone who's already had that much muscular development, imagine what it can do for you, sort of thing. So one example that I really like is there's a guy named Dexter Jackson, who many of you likely have heard of. He won Mr. Olympia in 2008, and then he attempted to compete again in his late 40s and when he turned 50. So in 2018, 19, 20, 21, he was competing again. And he started in his late 40s, he started to lose definition in his legs. And what they say in bodybuilding is once you lose your legs, you're done. Time to hang up the shorts there, because your career's over. And so Dexter, when he was 49, he started training with the NEWBIE once per week on his legs only, for the 16 weeks leading up to Mr. Olympia. And after not having finished in the top 10 in prior years, he went out there in 2021 at age 50, and he came in 4th. And if you look at the before and after photos, you can see his legs actually increased their size and definition in those 16 workouts that he did once per week with the NEWBIE. So there's this ability to load precisely specific muscles as if you were lifting 80 to 90% of 1 rep max, as if you were lifting very heavy. You're getting as much muscle recruitment, as much motor unit and muscle fiber recruitment, and therefore mechanical stress on the muscle, as if you were lifting heavy, but without having to lift nearly as much weight, because he had a knee injury and he couldn't deadlift or squat or leg press the same amount of weight, that he needed to do to actually stimulate his muscles. He was able to use a fraction of the weight and use this almost digital weight to get that motor unit recruitment. So you can do the same things if you have lagging biceps or lats or calves or glutes. Use the same thing. We have an electric booty class at our home office in Austin, Texas, where we have admittedly mostly women coming in for this electric booty class, and you can use the pads again to increase motor unit recruitment, this time in the glutes and core muscles, in order to increase muscle fiber activation, motor unit recruitment in those areas that you want. So there is that effect, and that has sort of trickled down as well to various gyms and facilities that will use it to make exercise more effective or more efficient or safer, again, because you're able to load muscles without as much strain or load on the joints. Like imagine you're trying to be like Dexter and you want to build your legs, and so you think you need to squat or deadlift heavy, but you have a very vulnerable lower back. I mean, ultimately, yes, we want to do things to strengthen it up and get you to be able to load it. And in the interim, if you want to train your legs, you can use this to help get that stimulation, get that load on the legs and glutes without having to put as much load or strain on that lumbar spine. So there's an avenue there. And then there's also the opportunity to help with the assessment and do the mapping like we talked about. Actually, but before I move on from the hypertrophy or physique or aesthetic component, I should mention a couple other studies that we had done. These were at the University of South Florida in Tampa in the muscle physiology lab there, looking at the effects of the NEWBIE device compared to traditional resistance exercise. So when I talk about how it's sort of like digital weight, these are the studies essentially that I'm referencing. So the first looked at the acute effect, comparing traditional resistance exercise to just using the NEWBIE with little to no external load to putting it on the muscles to use that signal to increase muscle activation. So the acute response was similar in terms of in terms of fatigue and soreness, and also the precursor to hypertrophy. Everyone listening to this is familiar with the pump. When you get, after you work out, your muscles get pumped up. There's actually physiological benefit to that because that means that your muscle cells are essentially slurping in the blood plasma, the fluids there, because that has the proteins and the other nutrients that the muscle fibers will use to rebuild and repair themselves after they've been depleted during exercise. So we see in this first study, we saw similar muscle cell swelling as visualized under ultrasound, similar swelling in the traditional resistance exercise and newbie only categories. And then we expanded it in the second study to looking at muscle growth over 8 weeks. And long story short, you saw similar muscle growth using traditional resistance exercise and using the newbie there. So then there's the applications in terms of function and performance. Yes, there's aesthetic and hypertrophy effects, and that's very important, even more important in certain populations. Or if you think about as people are getting older, the beneficial effects of muscle mass and body composition on various aspects of longevity, inflammation, and hormones, et cetera. And then also function is important at all ages. So being able to identify where the nervous system is limiting function, where those compensatory and protective neurological patterns are on the front end of any intake process, that can be very useful. And so some of the more fitness and performance oriented facilities, they tell us things like they really like doing that mapping process with everybody at the beginning because they can clean up movement patterns so they can get more out of the training once they really get to work. Or if they're working with athletes who are also in season or who injure themselves doing other things, they often might lose those clients because they're going to go off and do their therapy somewhere else. But if there's someone in-house who can do that work, you're able to keep them in the ecosystem. So there's a lot of facilities like we talked about Eric Cressy's facility in Florida, where they have a physical therapist in-house and they're using the NEWBIE there across that whole performance and physical therapy continuum. So there's different applications there, everything from the aesthetics to the general fitness to elite athletic performance.
Very cool. So, I mean, in 8 years, you've gone from concept to, hey, we're 400 to 500 facilities. We're certainly having a pretty profound impact. So, I mean, you touched on, hey, you're getting into maybe non-English speaking countries this year. What's next? What's on the horizon for NewFit, for NewBie? What's next for Garrett?
There's a few things right now that I'm very interested in. One is certainly more research avenues. I mentioned several of the published studies that we have. We've got a few more in the works that I'm really excited about. We do see ourselves as the gold standard of not only electrical stimulation, but the gold standard for optimizing the nervous system for rehabilitation and performance. And so as part of that, we have a strong sense of identity, which leads us to focus on innovation and working on next generations of our product and different things that we're going to be able to do to provide more value to our customers and allow them to help their own patients and clients in more unique and more valuable ways. So that's a big one for us. Also, as many people listening to this likely are very interested in AI applications and how the world is changing and the pace of acceleration and how in the next 5 years there's going to be as much change as the previous 50 to 100 years. And I'm doing my best to learn and understand where we can use technology to help make us better, to help us further our mission. And that's I don't have the answers right now other than just flagging it as something that I'm certainly following and doing my best to keep up with and figure out how to leverage.
So, the integration of AI continuing to have a pretty big impact. That sounds kind of familiar. I can relate. And so I'm curious because I think this is really, really a valuable thing to explore for whether it's private practice, physical therapy facilities that might be listening in, or fitness or performance facilities. Like what are logical next steps to maybe do some research to connect with you to learn more about what you do, and are those different varying on where your point of entry is?
If this message resonates with you at all, I think the one common thread throughout all the successful implementations of the NewFit method and the NEWBIE device in businesses is the ability to provide value right away to patients and clients to show that you can help understand their problem in new ways and meaningful ways and help make change faster than virtually anyone else can. And that creates the enthusiasm and the buy-in. So if that type of thing is interesting to you in your business, then I do think it is worth having a conversation. So Pat mentioned he was on our website looking at our directory of providers, which if you acquire a device and go through our training, eventually you would be on there as well. That going to the website www.new.fit, that's NEU.fit. You can go on there and there's a for providers link. There's for patients and for providers. You can click on the for providers link to learn a little more. And there's also a link there to connect with our team, and you can talk with. We have several reps who are representing the company and doing education. We don't do high pressure sales. Talk with you about your situation, see if it's a fit. We'll follow Pat's principles here, and we'd love to chat with you. And if you're interested, not in your business as much as trying it out personally for yourself or a family member, I invite you to check out on that same website, check out the directory and find a provider near you.
I mean, ironically enough, that's already a note for me today because I mean, on the list there were 23 different locations in Kentucky that had a newbie. So I'm like, man, I think I need to get on the schedule and check this out. So I'm excited about that. But man, I've enjoyed this a great deal. I'm glad we got to connect. I'm excited about what you're doing. I think it's really kind of not only have you had a pretty awesome reach thus far, but it's definitely on the upswing here and a lot of big things on the way. So Garrett, thank you for coming and spending some time here today.
Thank you, Pat. And hey, to hear kind words from you, a guy who I know really knows what he's talking about, that means a lot. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you having me on.
Well, I am glad we got to do this, and that's Pat and Garrett signing off with another episode of the Fitness Business School.